It's definitely true to say that aero in karting is not as important as, say, setup or gearing, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't matter. That's why aero kits are everywhere in karting right now. Now, most racers aren't going to have the time or budget to go out there and start testing all the different bits of bodywork kit, the new ones and the old ones, to see which one is best, but that doesn't mean that you can't get the best out of what you have, regardless of how old it is. It's time to aero optimize a pile of bricks. Let's get into it. First, to get the nerd stuff out of the way, the lap time is a function of average speed over distance. If you know those two things, you know exactly what your lap time is going to be. We want to increase our average speed as much as possible. Now, distance we can only make up for through the racing line, and we give up a little bit of distance to optimize our average speed in corners with the racing line as well. In karting, increasing your low end speed with downforce is a very difficult thing to do. You're moving at really low rates of speed, and you're going to have to move a lot of air, to create enough downforce to make a difference. Much easier is to reduce the amount of drag that kart is creating. Not only will drag reduction have the potential of increasing your top peak speed, but it also has the potential to increase the rate at which you get to that speed. Now, rulebooks and officials like me are going to stop you from doing whatever you want. Every series has some level of restriction. Even in European series run by the FIA, there are still things that you can't do to a kart. And here in North America, we are much more strict on what you can and can't do. But here are the basic things that you can do to your kart legally that are definitely going to help reduce drag and give you that speed. For bodywork, you want to get rid of anything that is worn out, that has holes in it, cracks. Not only do those things catch air, but they disturb air all the way down the go-kart. You want things to be smooth as possible. Also, you want to make sure that you attach it to the kart as the manufacturer intended. Where the fairing is positioned, its distance off the ground. Where the front panel or Nassau panel is positioned, how well it fits to the fairing so that it's not leaking air. Making sure that your side pods are positioned properly. Does the manufacturer want them closer to the front tires or closer to the rear tires? All this stuff matters. With rear protection, whenever possible, you're going to want to run metal because it's smaller and just has a lot less drag. But if you're forced to run plastic, make sure that it's in good shape, it's not torn up, and keep it tucked behind the tires as much as you can. You don't want it sticking out into the airflow above or below. Now, the floor pan is going to have a lot of setup considerations, but it also makes a massive difference in the aerodynamic drag of the kart. Whenever possible, you do not want holes in it. Or if you do have holes, you might want to consider taping them up. The size of the gap between the floor pan and the frame also makes a difference, as well as its height off the ground. Now, what you can do with the seat is going to depend greatly on which series you're doing. Now, SCUSA in the US or the FIA in Europe pretty much let you do almost whatever you want with the seat within certain parameters, but most other series have some pretty strict things that you are or are not allowed to do to a seat. So you do need to be careful and make sure you look at your regulations for it. But generally speaking, leaned back and low is going to be a lot more aerodynamic than upright in the air. Another consideration with seats are seat struts. The shape and size and position of those seat struts makes a huge difference in the way that the air flows around the back of the seat, which is where the vast majority of drag is. If you're smart and you're careful and you do some testing, you just might be able to find some drag reduction in the shape and position of those parts. With the chassis, you want to remove anything and everything that does not need to be there. You don't want the hardware to be any bigger than it needs to be. You don't want threads sticking out above the nut. You don't need super tall nuts unless it's what is called for by the manufacturer. You don't want to have square end bolts. You want to make sure that everything is clean and smooth as much as possible. Weights on the chassis are something that you can usually actually hide out of the main airflow. You'd always consider putting it out front by the feet if you need a little bit more front grip, or something that's tucked up under the front of the seat out of the main airflow. Chassis protectors, if your series allows them, you want them to be as thin as you can get away with. You don't want them to be any wider to be hitting the ground in the first place. You want them smooth and rounded at the front, and you want them to taper down at the back. Engines are a difficult consideration. I mean, again, being such a large part of the kart, it's going to have major setup implications. Anything you can do to clean up the wiring, make sure that the hoses are routed cleanly and out of the main airflow. Radiators are incredibly draggy, so anything you can do to reduce their cross-section, laying them down, but also reducing the amount of radiator that is exposed at any given time to whatever its minimum is for your engine temperature, that's going to help. Now, driver's equipment. This is one of the most overlooked things in racing. Think about the Olympics. Think about things like skeleton bobsled or speed skating. I mean, even swimming. They make sure that everything fits as tightly and as slimly as possible to reduce the amount of drag, because fabric flapping around in the air is massively draggy. If you've got a loose racing suit, you are costing yourself speed. Now, not everybody's going to be able to run out there and just buy a brand new racing suit willy-nilly, but the moment that you have the opportunity, that's something that you really need to consider. And anything you can do to make the racing suit you have fit better is worth it. This is true for shoes. Your racing shoes are sticking out there above the front fairing. If you can have a way to reposition your feet to get it out of the airflow, reduce the size of your shoes, that's always going to be a good thing. Even your gloves, the way that they fit and fit into your racing suit, make a difference. But then, of course, the single biggest piece of you that is sticking out in the airflow is your helmet. Now, karters being karters, the vast majority of us look to open wheel racing for what we should be running. They've got greeblies in a particular shape that are all designed for a headrest. A go-kart doesn't have one of those. Look at the shape of helmets in motorcycle racing, or again looking at the Olympics bobsled and skeleton. They are shaped very differently than helmets designed for open wheel race car, and they are much more analogous to something that you want to use in a go-kart. Keeping in mind that you're probably going to have to meet a specific Snell rating, looking for something that's designed for open airflow, not designed for a headrest, is going to be the way to go. So there are a bunch of things that you can do to yourself and your equipment that are going to make an appreciable difference to your average speed at the racetrack. Now, you've still got that pile of bricks, but now you've rounded off a few corners. So you think there's anything that I missed? Or is there stuff that you're doing to reduce drag that your rulebook allows you to do? Let me know what the rulebook is and what you're doing. Let me know down in the comments. Like, subscribe, share, and do all those good things. Thank you all for watching, and of course, I will see you at the racetrack.